Hi, you're watching us on NewsX and NewsX YouTube. My name is Devika Chopra. I have with me my senior colleague Rishabh Gulati, and we of course will be shedding some light on the Sri Lankan terror attacks that have taken place. Now Rishabh, let's talk about who did it. Let's really discuss what happened and who did it. But firstly, we need to point out the fact that no terror organization has come out to take responsibility for these terror attacks. So let's get right to it. Who do you think is behind it?
Yeah, that's the biggest question. Who did it? Most important question, who was behind it? Because then you get a motivation and then you have an comeuppance, an answerability that can actually be imposed upon whoever's done it. So let's look at the apply something called Occam's razor, which is to say that if you eliminate all the impossible, what is left is therefore the solution, therefore is the answer. There have been three principal conflicts that have taken place in Sri Lanka. The most infamous, of course, has been the ethnic conflict, which gave rise to the LTTE. Now, that was 10 years ago. Were there LTTE attacks in Colombo? Yes, there were. Were some involved in suicide bombings also? Yes. Was there ever something of this scale? No. Coordinated across multiple cities, 8 different points, 200 plus deaths and many other casualties. Never been something like this. Were the areas that were targeted ethnic specific? No. So you're not targeting military bases, you're not talking government buildings. This was a target of hotels and churches. Now, Christians in Sri Lanka come from both a Tamil ethnicity and a Sinhalese ethnicity. So the likelihood of this being an ethnic attack or a LTTE attack is almost nil. So number one, not LTTE. Now, the other conflict that is going on in Sri Lanka is a political conflict. Now, in a political conflict, you can look at exiles, you can even look at the suspicious and murders, potential assassinations. That would not be unheard of. But for political conflict to be targeting churches on Easter Day, unlikely. So you can mostly rule out that secondary conflict. The third conflict, of course, is a conflict that Buddhism is facing in Sri Lanka, and something similar to this has happened in Myanmar also. Does that mean churches will be attacked? Unlikely. So it's none of these three things. That leaves you with only one option. That this is something that has been imposed from abroad. This is a foreign imposition of some sort of ideology, radicalism that's been brought in. And that, of course, you can examine the imprints and DNA after that.
Right, absolutely. So like you said, that the possibilities of who is not behind them, since we've already addressed that, let's talk about this aspect of imported terrorism that we're talking about when it comes to these Sri Lankan attacks.
Okay, let's do a simple analysis with what happened in 26/11 that many people watching this broadcast in India will understand. What was attacked in 26/11? Hotels, and they attacked the Chawad House, and they attacked a hospital. The Chawad House, of course, is like a synagogue. It's a Jewish center. What's been attacked in Sri Lanka? Hotels and churches on Easter Day. So this is a very systematic, radical approach to target a particular religious community and to target hotels. We've seen this modus operandi before. It's very close to the modus operandi of 26/11. The difference being that the 26/11 modus operandi was recce done by people like David Headley. Decide the targets. These 10 terrorists given a list of targets, put in a boat and sent to India, and then they had 3 days in which they created
attacks,
havoc.
yes.
In many ways, the attack in Sri Lanka has been even better planned and coordinated than the 26/11 attacks. 26/11 attacks, you sent 10 guys and you were telling them over walkie-talkie what to do. These were 8 people in 8 different locations across cities, which means a quantity of explosives. They would have had to have training in bomb making, training in detonation, potential. Several of these attacks were by suicide bombers. So you need radicalized enough people, multiple people radicalized enough to do a suicide bomb on the same day. So just the logistics of it shows that this was better planned even than 26/11. Now, who has the capacity to plan it at this scale?
So when we look at the blueprint and the comparison that we've done, who do you think can we really take this terror attack and link it back to then? When we're talking about this sort of
capacity, if it's not an indigenous organization, and the people might be locals, the people might be indigenous, there might be some foreigners, but if it's not an indigenous organization with a capacity that large to create, maybe if you look at 8 bombs, 100 kilograms of high explosive, multiple suicide jackets, have a network of people to transport them, slip under the intelligence radar, a very convoluted thing. This has to be being provided by technical know-how, and trade is done on terrorism is done in 2 places. Either through Turkey into Syria, ISIS dominated, or in Pakistan. There are only 2 places in the world where terrorists, ISIS style, are being trained in building bombs and being radicalized to become suicide bombers. These are the two fundamental places. So it has to be either one or the two. And these are the only two organizations that have the capability and the capacity of doing and planning something that requires so much logistical support. This is completely different from a lone wolf attack.
Absolutely.
You saw what happened in New Zealand. That's one guy with weapons who's crazy, right? And he's shooting people. The planning required in there is almost nil. You have to buy the weapons, but that's it, right? In this case, you have to build the weapons, you have to build the bombs, you have to train the people, you have to radicalize the people. It's a huge effort, and you can see a large cell has operated it. So obviously a larger entity has been involved in the operation. There are only two such entities, ISIS and the Pakistanis who run terrorism as a state machinery. And there are only two places in the world where such kind of training is offered. One is in Pakistan and the other, of course, is in Syria.
And at the same time, Rishabh, also a suicide bombing as a method of attack is also something that has been closely linked to the ISIS. So that, of course, gives us maybe a further hint as well.
So what they've attacked, how they've attacked it, in the style of attacking hotels, is the style of attacking hotels in the way they've been done is a very Pakistan extremist terrorist style of doing things. Using suicide bombers, as you mentioned, is a very ISIS way of doing things. You saw that, for example, what happened in Baramulla. You've seen an attack take place by a suicide bomber as opposed to a terrorist. So the 10 terrorists who came in 26/11 were not suicide bombers. They were on a suicide mission, but they were not suicide bombers. So that is an ISIS imprint that's already come into Pakistan. Baramulla is an example, a suicide bomber. So suicide bomber, the choice of targets, Easter Sunday, targeting churches and targeting them in a country vulnerable because it's not expecting that target. Other countries in the world are expecting it, so you're more alert about it. Sri Lanka was not expecting something like this to happen. So without a doubt, it is almost inevitable that you're going to see either a Pakistani linked DNA, and all these organizations are now amorphous, or you're going to see an ISIS linked DNA. And if people have been part of the group, have been arrested, have potentially been cauterized, some of the materials have been recovered, then it's almost inevitable that you'll see all fingers pointing in one direction, and that will answer who did it. There is a talk going on that there is a local terror outfit called NTJ which might be involved in these attacks. That's what the local talk is going on in Sri Lanka. It is a local outfit, but just like Indian Mujahideen was technically a local outfit, it was
and then it was supplied,
radicalized,
right,
funded by Pakistani terror groups. So it's the same thing that could apply. There has never been a terrorist organization in Sri Lanka with the capacity to do something like this. So it has to have been foreign imported radicalization and suicide bombing strategies.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Rishabh. That was, of course, our analysis of who is not behind the attacks and who could possibly be behind the Sri Lanka terror attacks. Thank you for watching this video, and if you do like it, then go ahead and share.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.